Introduction to AHMAD SHAH ABDÂLî, Shah DURR-I-DURRÂN. Ahmad Shah, the founder of the Durrani monarchy, rose from the mere character of a partisan to a distinguished command in the service of the Persian conqueror, Nadir Shah, of the family of the Sadozis, and chief of the tribe of ABdâLî, the most illustrious family of the Afghans. He was, in his youth, imprisoned in a fortress with his elder brother Zulfikar Khan by Hussein Khan, governor of Kandahar, for the Ghazis, which powerful tribe of Afghans, after overrunning the whole of Persia, had a few years previously trodden the throne of the Sufis in the dust and conquered that mighty empire. Ahmad Shah and his brother, whose tribe were at feud with the Ghazis, owed their freedom to Nadir Shah, who in the year 1736 to 1737 of the Vulgar era laid siege to Kandahar, which he captured. The brothers, with a powerful body of their clansmen, people of the same tribe, not the other one, followed the fortunes of the conqueror and greatly distinguished themselves in the war with the Turks, and were rewarded with the lands now held by the Durrani tribe in the vicinity of Kandahar. On the day subsequent to the murder of Nadir Shah, the particulars of which, as belonging to Persian history, need not be here detailed, although one among the causes of it has been attributed to his attachment to the Afghan troops in his service. A battle ensued between the Persians on the one side and the Afghans and Uzbeks on the other, but the event does not appear to have decided anything. But after this affair, Ahmad Shah saw that no time was to be lost in looking to the safety of himself and clansmen, and he accordingly fought his way through the greater part of Khorasan with a small force between 2,000 and 3,000 horsemen, and repaired by rapid marches to Kandahar, which had now become the headquarters of the ABdâLî tribe, the chief city of southwestern Afghanistan. Here he intercepted an immense treasure, which had been sent from India for the use of Nadir Shah, which Ahmed appropriated after compelling the Durranis, who had first seized upon it, to give it up. In October of the same year, Ahmed, then but 23 years old, assumed the title of Shah, or King of Afghanistan, and was crowned at Kandahar. With great pomp, the different chiefs of the various Afghan tribes, with but few exceptions, and the Qazilbashes, Bulukis, Hazaras, assisting, thus laying the foundation of the Durrani monarchy. And although the warlike and independent people who now become in his subjects had never been accustomed to a sovereign's yoke, save in being compelled to pay tribute to a foreign ruler, yet such were his energy and capacity for government that he was successful in gaining the affection of his own tribe, and with the exception of the Ghazis, ever a most turbulent and unruly sect, he succeeded in instilling among other Afghan tribes a spirit of attachment to their native monarchy, and also in others not Afghans but dwelling in Afghanistan, with the Baluch and Hazara tribes, his neighbors. He formed an offensive and defensive alliance, having first brought the refractory Ghazis into subjection. Ahmad Shah began his conquests, and such was the uninterrupted tide of his success. That by the summer of 1751, he had conquered the whole of the countries, extending as far west as Nishapur in the Persian Khorasan. In 1752, he conquered Kashmir and obtained from the Mughal Emperor of Hindustan a cession of the whole of the tract of country as far east as Sirhind, thus laying the foundation of a kingdom which soon became formidable to surrounding nations. Ahmad Shah had now leisure to turn his attention to internal affairs and to the settlement of Afghanistan and the newly acquired provinces. He thus passed the next 4 years in tranquility and appears to have had time to devote himself to literature. He used to hold at stated periods what is termed a majlis ulama, or assembly of the learned, the early part of which was generally devoted to divinity and civil law. And I think that form is more known among the Shia than the Sunni, or even Sufi, but it's broader than that, right? For Ahmad Shah himself was a Olawi, and concluded with conversations on science and poetry. Is that what you call sohbet or something? He wrote a collection of odes in Pashto, his own native tongue, tinged as usual with mysticism of the Sufis, and from that work the following specimens have been taken. The work is scarce, particularly in eastern Afghanistan. He was also the author of several poems in the Persian language. In the years 1756, the Common Era, Ahmad Shah had again to buckle on the sword and advance it into the Punjab, which the Mughals about this time attempted to recover. But he quickly regained all that had been lost, drove them out of the Punjab, and advanced straight upon Delhi, which he entered after but a faint opposition, his troops having become sickly from passing the whole of the hot season in India, warned Ahmad Shah to return, which he did soon after, having compelled the Mughal emperor to bestow the Punjab and Sindh upon his son Timur, who had already been married to a Mughal princess, and Ahmad Shah passed the next winter at Kandahar, but was obliged to set out soon after, for the purpose of quelling disturbances in Persia and Turkestan. During the next year, matters had gone on badly in India, and Prince Timur was unable to stem the tide of Maharata conquests, which had now rolled upon the Punjab. The Maharatas had taken Sirhind and were advancing from the west, which put Prince Timur under the necessity of retiring across the Indus with his troops. The Maharatas, now being unopposed, pushed on as far as the Hydaspes or Jhelum, and also detached a force to take possession of Multan. And if you look at the responding to the New Age religion Ekankar playlist, the Jhelum River is probably mentioned for significance of symbolic import, perhaps related to this instance. These events happened in the summer of 1758. Now, Ahmad Shah was preparing to march into India when he was detained by the rebellion of the Balukis. And although this matter was subsequently settled by negotiation, it was not until the winter of 1759 that he could cross the Indus and advance towards Hindustan, the Maharatas retreating before him towards Delhi with intention of covering that city after totally defeating them at Budli Ahmad Shah again captured Delhi. He afterwards pursued his conquest in the Doab, but subsequently encamped at a place near AHMAD Shah, where, being joined by the Wazir of Hindustan with the few available troops of the Mughal emperor, he prepared for passing the monsoon rainy season and for the final struggle with the Maharathas, upon which the fate of India rested. The strength of Ahmad Shah's army consisted of 41,800 horses, his own subjects, on whom he chiefly relied, 28,000 Rohillas, Afghans, who were descended from those tribes who had emigrated from Afghanistan at different periods and settled in India, and about 10,000 Hindustani troops under their own chiefs. He had also 700 zambaraks, or camel swivels, small pieces carrying balls of about a pound weight, and a few pieces of artillery. The Maharatha army under Wiswas Rao and Shedashao Rao, better known as the Ball, consisting of about 70,000 horses, 15,000 infantry trained after the European fashion, and 200 pieces of artillery, besides numberless shuturnals or zamburaks. At length, on the 7th of January, 1761, after facing each other for some months, the Maharathas, who had been blockaded in their own entrenched camp at Panipat, a few miles from Delhi, were, from the extremities to which they were put for want of food and forage, under the necessity of attacking the Durrani army. The details of this great and important battle need not be enlarged on here. Suffice it to say that Ahmad Shah was completely successful. The Maharathas were entirely defeated and put to flight, and Wiwas Rao, the heir apparent of the Maharatha Empire, and almost the whole of the army perished in the flight or pursuit. The crowning victory at Panipat, which was fatal to the power of the Maharathas, laid Hindustan at the feet of Ahmad Shah, but he, seeing the difficulty of retaining so remote a dominion, adhered to the wise plan he had from the first carved out and contented himself with that portion of India that had been formerly been ceded to him, bestowing the rest on such native chiefs as had aided him in the struggle. When conquering, you always got to make it better for some of the natives at the very least. In the spring of 1761, Ahmad Shah returned to Kabul, and from that period up to the spring of 1773 was actively employed against foreign and domestic foes. But at that time, his health, which had been long declining, continued to get worse and prevented his engaging in any foreign expeditions. His complaint was a cancer in the face, which had afflicted him first in 1764, and at last occasioned his death. He died at Murghah in Afghanistan in the beginning of June of 1773, and the 50th year of his age. The countries under his dominion extended, at the time of his death, from the west of Khorasan to Sirhind on the Jumna, and from the Oxus to the Indian Ocean, all either secured by treaty or an actual possession. The character of Ahmad Shah has been so admirably depicted by Mountstuart Elphinstone that I shall not hesitate to give it here in full. The character of Ahmad Shah appears to have been admirably suited to the situation in which he was placed. His enterprise and decision enabled him to profit by the confusion that followed the death of Nadir, and the prudence and moderation which he acquired from his own dealings with his own nation were no less necessary to govern a warlike and independent people than the bold and commanding turn of his own genius. His military courage and activity are spoken of with admiration, both by his own subjects and the nations with whom he was engaged, either in wars or alliances. He seems to have been naturally disposed to mildness and clemency. And though it is impossible to acquire sovereign power, and perhaps in Asia to maintain it without crimes, yet the memory of no Eastern prince is stained with fewer acts of cruelty and injustice. In his personal character, he seems to have been cheerful, affable, and good-natured. He maintained considerable dignity on state occasions, but at other times his manners were plain and familiar, and with the Durranis he kept up the same equal and popular demeanor, which was usual with their khans or chiefs before they assumed the title of king. He treated mullahs and holy men with great respect. Both from policy and inclination, he was himself a divine and an author. I don't like this calling spiritual figures divines, but it's the way we speak. And was always ambitious of the character of a saint. His policy towards the different parts of its dominions was to rely principally on conciliation with the Afghans and the Baluchis, with this difference between the nations, that he applied himself to the whole people in the first case, and only to the chief in the other. His possessions in Turkestan he kept under by force, but left the Tartar chiefs of the country unremoved, and used them with moderation. The Indian provinces were kept by force alone, and in Khorasan he trusted to the attachment of some chiefs, to hostages from others, and was ready to carry his arms against any who disturbed his plans. The handsome tomb of AHMAD Shah stands near the place at Kandahar. It is held in quite estimation by the Durranis, and is respected as a sanctuary, no one venturing to touch one who has taken refuge there. It is not uncommon for persons of even the highest rank to give up the world and spend their lives at the monarch's tomb, and certainly, if ever an Asiatic king deserved the gratitude of his country, it was AHMAD Shah, the pearl of the Durranis. AHMAD Shah was the grandfather of the unfortunate Shah Shuja-ul-Mulk, whom the British reseated on the throne of the Durranis in 1839, which affair terminated so unfortunately for all concerned. DURR-I-DURRAN is the pearl of the Durranis, and the Abdālīs were called such because they had pearls in their ear. And there's a term